You know, every once in a while, you find something that feels like a message in a bottle, a voice reaching out from a time so different from our own. It's like another planet. Well, today, we get to open one of those bottles. It's a memoir written back in 1917 by a man named Thomas Richmond. It was his final gift to his grandchildren, and what a story it is. So let's dive in.
And this is how he starts. I mean, right from the first line, you can just feel the warmth, can't you? This isn't some dry history book. This is a grandfather talking to his family. This one sentence, it really sets the stage for everything that's to come. It's personal, it's from the heart, and it's a story of a life lived through just unimaginable change. So who exactly was this man behind the words? Well, picture this. It's early 1917. Thomas Richmond is 69 years old. He sits down knowing his time is probably short and he wants to leave something behind. Not just memories, but a record, a story. And man, what a life he had to record. You see the highlights here, right? But think about what's packed into each one of those titles. An immigrant who literally helped build American industry, a dad who experienced the highest joys and the most crushing losses, and a guy who stood and watched the entire world transform before his very eyes. His story begins in a tiny English village. And get this, he was born Thomas Richmond, not Richmond. He makes a point to correct that in his memoir. His dad was a coal laborer doing backbreaking work, but it was his mom, a woolen weaver, whose job almost seems like a little bit of foreshadowing for his entire life's work in the textile mills of America. All right, so here comes the big turning point. In 1856, Thomas is just 8 years old, and his family makes a decision that changes absolutely everything. They decide to leave it all behind and go to America. This was their great crossing. Just look at the stages of this journey and try to imagine being his mother. His dad had already gone ahead to find work, so she had to shepherd 5 young kids on this trek all by herself, from their small village to a big, chaotic port city, then weeks on a ship sailing into the complete unknown. It is absolutely staggering to think about. And yeah, this was definitely not a pleasure cruise. Thomas's own words, they paint such a vivid, gritty picture. For an 8-year-old kid, can you imagine the mix of fear and, I don't know, adventure? This quote just hits you with the harsh reality that millions of immigrants faced, all for the hope of something better. So they make it. After landing in New York, the family finds its way to the mill towns of New England. And this is where the story really picks up, where this young English boy starts the long, tough journey of becoming an American man. This comparison here really says it all, doesn't it? It's the incredible arc of a life. He tells stories about how he was called the little Englishman and kids made fun of his accent. But he went from that to becoming a respected professional, a citizen, and a leader. He literally climbed the ladder through sheer grit and hard work. It's the classic American dream, right there. Of course, no great story is complete without a love story. He met Juliet White at a church event, and he says he was totally intimidated. He was just a mill worker with rough hands. She was a talented musician. But as he puts it, she saw past all that. She saw his drive. And they got married in 1868. And his rise at work was just as impressive. You can see it on the timeline here. It was steady, step by step. He started at the absolute bottom, sweeping floors, but he paid attention, he learned the machines, and he mastered the really complex art of carding wool. He didn't just punch a clock. He became one of the best in his field. Then, in 1890, comes this really powerful moment. He's 42 years old, and he's lived in America for 34 years, longer than he ever lived in England. He walks into a courthouse and officially becomes a U.S. citizen. He wrote that it was this incredibly emotional day for him, like closing one chapter of his life for good and fully embracing the next. So Thomas's professional life was this amazing story of success, but his personal life, well, like it was for so many people back then, it was a dramatic roller coaster of incredible happiness and just soul-crushing tragedy. First, let's talk about the joy. 9 children. Can you imagine? He writes that their home was just always buzzing with noise and chaos. Kids playing, babies crying, his wife Juliet playing the piano. On a simple mill worker's salary, they built this big, bustling family. And then this sorrow, this number right here, is a total gut punch. 4. He buried 4 of his own 9 kids. He even writes, "It seems wrong, doesn't it? Children should bury their parents, not the other way around. And you can still feel the pain in those words, more than 100 years later. When you lay it all out on a timeline like this, it's just relentless. First, losing a little boy, then a grown son, and then 1913. What an absolutely brutal, horrible year. He loses Juliet, his partner of 45 years, and then just 1 month later, his youngest son. It's an amount of grief that's almost impossible to comprehend. Okay, let's zoom out for a minute, because what makes Thomas's story so powerful is that his whole life, all the good and all the bad, it happened against the backdrop of one of the fastest, most radical periods of change in human history. I mean, just look at this chart. It puts everything in perspective. He was born into a world that ran on horsepower and was lit by candles. He died in a world of cars, telephones, and electric lights. The Industrial Revolution wasn't something he read about in a book. He lived it every single day. Just think about the sheer volume of history he witnessed. 4 different British monarchs, 15 U.S. presidents. He saw America tear itself in two during the Civil War, and then live long enough to see it become a world power and enter World War I. It is truly mind-boggling. So, after living through all that, what was the wisdom he wanted to pass on? What was the point of it all? His final thoughts are so simple, but they're so profound. These were the values that a life of hard work, deep love, and constant change had taught him. This was the real inheritance he wanted to leave his grandkids. And this is how he ends it. For him, his legacy wasn't money or a house, it was them. His children and grandchildren were the living thread connecting his story with the future. A thread that stretched all the way from a small village in England into a new, uncertain American century. It's such a beautiful reminder that the stories we live every day, they become the history that we pass on.